Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Redefining Recruitment, how to nail any interview. Of course, today we have our president of Twice as Nice Recruiting, Patrick Cahill, with us. Patrick, how are you?
Doing great. I enjoy talking about interviews, so I'm excited.
Yep, it's a great subject, especially for a recruiting firm. And of course, we have our VP of Search, Carolee Coleman. Carolee, how are you today?
Doing fantastic. Thank you. How about you?
Thanks for asking. No one ever asked me. Oh my gosh, now I don't know what to say, but I am feeling great today because we're talking about interviews. It is a fantastic subject and we get to help people nail their interviews, which is always so great. Now, of course, interviews can be nerve-wracking. You can feel on the spot like I just did when Carolee asked me how I was feeling because no one ever does that. And of course, navigating the different types of interviews from phone, video, and in person can mean there's a lot of different things at play that you have to prepare for as a candidate, and it can feel really overwhelming. But we're going to get you all set up, prepped, and ready to nail any interview you have, whether that is phone, in person, or on video. But first, let's get to know each other. We are Twice as Nice Recruiting, and we do one thing, and that's permanent placement. We build every single search from scratch. We have a 9.9% placement fee, and we guarantee your placements for 18 months. We've worked with more than 1,800 clients to fill roles across the board. And today, we're redefining recruitment. So Carolee, we're going to go over what candidates should do for phone, video, and in-person interviews. But I'm assuming there's some general rules of thumb for all kinds of interviews that candidates should follow. Do you have some general tips and tricks for candidates, regardless of what type of interview they're on?
Definitely. I'd say just like from a high level overview for any type of interview, you really want to know about the company that you're interviewing for, check out their website, know a little bit about them. You want to make sure you've read that job description, make sure you understand what it is that you're interviewing for. And then, of course, you need to know your resume. You want to know the story behind who you are and make sure that what you're talking about matches what your resume says.
All great tips. Patrick, do you have any general rules of thumb that candidates should follow for all interviews?
The general rule of thumb that I always like is ask what that next step is, just so you can build expectations, know if the employer is doing what they say they're going to do, and also expresses your interest in continuing the process.
And can kind of start getting you prepped for whatever that next step is, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good tip. Okay, so let's start with phone interviews because in a lot of cases, of course, not all, that is typically the first interview that a lot of candidates will face, a phone interview. For some people, that can be way less nerve-wracking. It's not as intense maybe as an in-person interview. For other people like me, for whatever reason, I don't like talking on the phone. That can be incredibly nerve-wracking. What should people do to prepare for a phone interview specifically that they might not need to do for other types of interviews?
I think one of the benefits of a phone interview is the person can't see you. So you can have notes out. So it means you can have the job description printed out or pulled up on your computer screen. You can have some bolded key points about yourself and why you are a good fit for the role. You can have your resume ready. You can have a little blurb about what the company does and who they are. So you can kind of have those like cheat sheets out and nobody will really know as long as you're not just reading sentences or paragraphs. That would make it very obvious. And then for phone interviews, you really want to maybe prep for questions that are kind of those beginning stage questions, like questions that are going to try to determine, are you a good fit for the role? Are you jiving with the culture of the company? I think you want to have that positive mindset that the interview will go well. So make sure you have your calendar ready so that you can be available to schedule that next interview and you know what your schedule looks like so you can do it right there on the spot if they want to. And really for a successful interview, you want to make sure that you have a quiet environment, one where you don't have a lot of distractions, one where the person interviewing you will be able to hear you clearly. So again, that quiet environment, a charged phone, maybe AirPods if you use them, or plug-in headpieces, whatever makes it so that your sound quality will be good.
I think if you know you're having a scheduled phone-based interview, I'm a big fan of reducing variables, reducing potential surprises. Call someone, test out how you sound, make sure the environment is one that you're set up for success in, get that feedback from a friend, family member on, hey, you sound great. So you're good there. Technology's working. Also, just general positivity. My background, sales, what we talk a lot about, whether it's interviewing or selling over the phone, smile, be engaged as if you're talking to someone right in front of you. It does come through on the phone and provides that kind of engaging friendliness and professionalism. Um, Other small things like make sure that you're not blocking phone numbers or that you're have your phone silenced so you don't miss that call. If you do miss a call, make sure your voicemail box isn't full and has a professional sounding voicemail message. Because I know I've called a number of candidates where I wish I can get in touch with them, but their voicemail box is full and I literally don't know what to do. It's I really want to talk to them. But in general, also remember if you get a phone call and you're having that initial screening interview, usually the individuals who are interviewing people, they don't want to call someone that they suspect isn't qualified for a role. So if you're on the phone, you've accomplished so much of the battle and you just want to be engaged, show your level of interest, focus dialed in, because likely the person already thinks you're highly qualified. And so now they're trying to get a feel for, will my colleagues enjoy speaking to this person, enjoy working with this person? And like Carolee said, do the facts in the resume check out during the conversation?
Oh, that should relieve a ton of pressure for candidates, right? Because a lot of times with those screening interviews, that can feel really overwhelming. But hey, you're saying you're probably already qualified. They're just kind of seeing if everything fits and matches.
Oftentimes, yeah, it's something we find HR managers, hiring managers, employers in general, for whatever reason, are really timid to pick up the phone and call someone that they suspect is more likely than not qualified for the role. They don't want to engage because a lot of people don't like, that awkward, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work out. And so they try to reduce the risk of that by really calling people that are only highly qualified. So again, yeah, if you're on the phone, you look good to that employer.
So for video interviews, that can often be the next step after a phone interview. Especially today, in the modern era, I guess we're even doing this over Zoom. A lot of video interviews are very popular. A lot of employers will use them. But of course, these can come with their own set of challenges and hurdles and anxieties for candidates. What are some major steps that candidates should take to prepare and nail their video interview? Carolee, let's go to you first.
Great question. And you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about there's a lot of different technologies, right? So you want to make sure that whatever platform you're using to do the video interview, that you're prepared to use it. So there's Teams, there's Zoom, there's Google Meet. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones. Make sure you have it downloaded if it needs to be downloaded. Make sure you have it updated if it is downloaded. We all know sometimes Zoom updates, and you want to make sure that you're not running late to the interview because it's doing a lengthy update. You also want to test your internet connection because you don't want to freeze in the middle of the interview. So I think that's super important. And then you want to make sure you have a work appropriate background. So I'm not saying you need it to look like an office, but if you have a bed behind you, make the bed. Take the clothes off of it, or fuzz your background so that it's not super obvious what's behind you. If possible, don't have people walking behind you because that could be distracting. So try to get yourself in more of a private area if possible. And then I know in my office when it's really dark outside, so if it's really early in the morning or really late at night, the lighting in this room is terrible. And so check your lighting, make sure you have good lighting. If you know that it's going to be dark outside and your room gets a little darker, try to bring in an extra lamp so that it's a little bit brighter. And then you just want to appear professional and clean, right? Make sure you're giving off a good impression in that video interview.
Patrick, I'm sure that you have something to add.
Yeah, I think the big thing is if you're applying for a role that's remote or has a significant portion work from home, I think the pressures are even greater on what does your environment look like when you're doing a video-based interview. If it's just another screening, then I think some of the pressures are a little lower. You don't necessarily have to show off your amazing professional work environment at home, but that's just something to think about is what are you trying to demonstrate in the video interview? Just like the phone, though, eliminating variables, just testing out that environment. If it's a technology that you're not familiar with and you can't seem to sign in before the call starts, I don't know, check out a YouTube video on how it works. Just get yourself a little bit more familiar. You don't want the first 7 minutes of an interview, you bumbling around, being like, oh, I'm so sorry, I haven't used this before. And you just try to eliminate any of those risks. but you can typically still show up early on a lot of these technologies and make sure your right cameras being selected, your right microphones being selected. If you are using a headset, if you have a webcam, sometimes these technologies accidentally choose the wrong microphone. So even though you've got your headset on, your computer doesn't know that's the one you want to use. Make sure you're actually selecting the correct source, or that time you're nervously tapping your keyboard that's out of frame, that you think is not being noticed. It could be right next to the microphone that the computer's actually using for that technology. It could be distracting. And just again, on the riffing off the phone-based interview, as you progress during these interview stages, typically that's just suggests further that this employer is more and more interested in you. You seem more and more qualified, and it starts to become more and more of a personality, just general, will this person fit within the organization? And so you just want to come off as put together, engaging, excited, interested, someone that you would want to work with, because that'll make them want to work with you. And if you find, though, that there's revisiting themes of things that you answered in a previous interview, or if you're going to talk to multiple people and the theme keeps coming up, that might be an indicator that there is one aspect that they're not sure about, and really make sure you flush that out at this stage of the interview process if topics are being revisited.
Now let's get to the big, scary interview, the in-person interview. Oh my goodness, this is where the sweaty palms come out. Of course, these in-person interviews require way more dedication for both the employee and the employer. What should some people do to get ready for in-person interviews and make sure they nail it? Carolee?
I think right off the bat, you just want to dress professionally, show up, be fresh, be clean, have some copies of your resume printed if you're able to. So then that way you can hand it to them and provide them with a reference sheet if they want to check it out. Know that you're able to take notes during an interview. It is a-okay to show up with a notebook and write down some maybe questions as they pop into your head, or write down some key pieces they share that you really enjoy. Make sure you're making eye contact with people, that you're smiling, that you're being personable, because this is a great time to make that human connection and really vibe with them face to face.
Just on that, I could imagine, I think of maybe some of the cynics out there, a lot of this doesn't seem like it really speaks to my qualifications for the role. Why is there so much focus on all the stuff that doesn't matter? How does this change whether or not I can oversee a manufacturing line, or make sure we have safe protocols out in the field, or whatever the job you might be applying for? But remember, at these stages, because employers are risk adverse with who they're engaging with in interviews, they have a potentially lineup of very qualified individuals, including you. And so it starts to be, they're not comparing qualifications, they're comparing likelihood of enjoying working with this person long term. And so I just want to make sure emphasize that, it's not that you're in this vacuum. You're sharing the stage with other candidates who are just as qualified as you are at this stage. And so that's why these small gestures and preparations can make the difference as an employer is evaluating who do I want to work with for the next 5 years. And so, on that theme, asking ahead, who am I going to be meeting with? So you can do that LinkedIn research, see if there are potential connections. Oh, that person mentioned they love volleyball. I love volleyball. Oh, that person mentions they like to travel to this place when they aren't working. I enjoy traveling to that place. Same college, same former employer. Those little connections can really get conversations going, because not only are you going to connect with the person in the moment because of that shared interest, but you're also showing you did your homework. And that's a big differentiator from a lot of candidates. Sending the follow-up thank you emails, it's something that I think has fallen out of favor. Not a lot of people do it, but as long as you spell check it, check the grammar, read it over 4 times before you hit send, it's also a differentiator that people appreciate. And then just in terms of showing up on time, sometimes we see candidates make mistakes where they're getting ready in the evening because they've got their interview in the next morning. They check their Google Maps. Oh, it's a 27-minute drive, so I'll leave at this time. But when you check the traffic at 9:30 p.m., it's going to show a different amount of time than when you actually are driving there at 8:30 a.m. And so use those tools that Google Maps provides, and I'm sure others do as well, as, hey, I want to arrive by this time, or I want to leave at this time. What is the likely range of time it's going to take me? So that way you can actually, not be stressing out on your drive in, because, you're nervous enough, as Megan, you said, sweaty palms, showing up late to an interview definitely doesn't help that nervousness. I think if you set yourself up with all these tips, you're going to kill it on the in-person interview.
These were all very helpful tips and tricks, and I'm sure all of our candidates can go into any interview now and feel confident and comfortable that they're going to nail it if they use all of these tips and steps. Thank you so much for your expertise and insight, guys, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Redefining Recruitment.